All right, back in PyCharm, it's time to build that cat factory. So, like always, we will add a new Python file to get started, and in our convention, we'll call that program.py. Let's go ahead and define our main method, as you guys should be familiar with by now. So we'll create our main, and down here, let's do a few things. I'll just sketch this out in comments. So let's start by saying print the header, as usual. Next, we're going to get or create output folder, and then we'll download cats, and then finally let's go and actually display cats. Now, just so that we can sort of see things right, I'll just say hello from main just for a moment so we can get everything executing just fine. Remember, we have the live template in PyCharm that gives us the correct pattern for launching our main method only if it's being called as the program itself. So here we'll just say main, nothing too fancy there, and let's go ahead and run it once to set up the run configuration. Boom. All right, so everything's working. First thing we've got to do is print the header. That is pretty straightforward. So we'll just say def print header. And you guys are really familiar with this by now, so we'll say print, and it's this sort of thing. Do a little duplication, and we'll call it cat factory. Something like that. How about with a capital O, huh? So we can go over here, let's get rid of this useless little print, and let's go up here, we'll call print header. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work with our output folder. So let's write a method down here called get or create output folder. All right, so now we're going to use our OS module and the path class. So we're going to come up here, and we can have PyCharm do this, or we could say import OS, and down here, we have to pick what our folder is called. So we'll say folder equals, and let's just call it cat pictures, something like that to make it really obvious. And then we'd like to create this folder. First, we'd like to figure out what the full path is, and then we're going to either create it or just return it if it already exists. So let's say full path equals this, so os.path.join, and we could start by joining just this in the folder. And let's just for a moment print that out. This you guys have already seen. Let's make sure we call it so that something actually happens. And if we run this, you can see we have /cat factories. And before, we were actually able to come up with the full path. And that was actually working out pretty well. We were saying os.path.absolute path. And we got our full path to where this folder that doesn't yet exist was. However, the fact that we say dot really is a comment on the working folder, not relative to this particular Python script. So if I would like to have this folder called cat pictures right next to my program.py file here, we could do something different. Let me just do a print statement here. You saw that there's under name, that is a special string that's defined, right? We're using that right here, and it's main. That's literally what it is, the way we're running it now, or it's going to be program. But there's another one that we can work with called file. And you can see that here is the file that we're currently in, the module that we're currently running in, regardless of what the working folder is. So we can actually get the base, let's call it the base folder. We can get it like this. We can say os.path and just call dir name and give it this file here like so. And instead of using this absolute path and all this stuff, we can just go back and say, we're going to combine base folder with our little local folder. And you should see we'll have the same output, but this time it's sort of independent of the working folder. So we now have our folder. The next thing to do is create this folder, but only if it doesn't exist yet. So we'll say if not os.path.exists, give it the full path. This is the folder that we're going to work with, but maybe this is a file. Maybe somebody's created a file called cat pictures here, and we'd like a folder as well. So we could say or, and come down here and say is dir. And let's put a not here. Okay, so now we want to create this directory at full path. And if this had many levels in it that didn't already exist, you'd have to kind of do this recursively. But we'll just say os.makedir. Remember, it's not on the path. It's actually on the OS module directly. And we'll give it the full path. And we'd kind of like to know, did the thing find the path before or did it actually create it? So let's do something like this. We'll say print creating new directory at, and we'll put the little location here. So only when we're creating the directory should we see this print statement, but either way, we should return the full path. Now, let me leave this out just for a second to show you some PyCharm goodness. So if I come over here and I create a variable, and I say this is going to be the folder, like this, right away, PyCharm says, no, this is a bad idea. It looks like you're trying to store the return value of a function into this variable folder. Yes, we are. But if you look carefully, it will say this get or create output folder method does not return anything. In some languages, this would crash or not compile or something. But in Python, there's an implicit return value for all functions. Every function returns a thing, but if you just omit the return statement, it's only going to return none. So it's not super useful. That's kind of a warning that, oh, whoops, we forgot to return full path, regardless of whether we created it. Now let's just do a print really quick. We'll probably throw this away, but we'll print. So found or created folder, and we'll just put a little folder. Okay, now let's run it. If you look over here, there is no cat pictures directory, but if I run it, it says create a new directory here, and then it says found or created the folder there, yes. And now you can see PyCharm's automatically refreshed and found, hey, there's cat pictures here. If I run it again, we should only see the second found or created, but not the actually creating line. Perfect, so now we don't recreate it, and actually that would have crashed had we tried. That's the first half of our OS part. We've created this folder and we're ready to put our binary data into it. The next thing we have to do is go download some cat data. Before we do that, let's just hit a little Command-Alt-L to do some cleanup and have our code look nice and fresh.